So we're joined now by Jon Goode, one of the most handsome musician in South Wales Award 2020. Hello, Jon.
Hello, Steve. Thank you for the introduction.
It's really nice to see you again. We have been sort of quite good friends really over the years because of what we were doing, but now you're doing something else. Just to say, we did work together at the University of South Wales. What was your role there again, Jon? Something to popular music?
So my role at the University of South Wales, I headed up the ICMP programs there. I was academic manager for that, and then I became course leader for the BMUS in contemporary music performance. And prior to that, I was course leader for the foundation degree in music industry entrepreneurship.
Okay, so ICMP is Institute for Contemporary Music Production or something like that, is it?
Music performance. Yeah,
music performance, okay. So, I mean, what I remember working with you then is lots of smiley faces, lots of positivity, lots of fun, people looking like they enjoyed it. Your students were having, I mean, genuinely, yeah, really just a buzzy atmosphere. And, of course, I work with some of your students and work with them on radio interviews, etc. Do you know if any of them have managed to kind of break through and start to make it at all?
Well, I follow quite a few of them on Instagram and on Facebook, and I have to be honest, the vast majority of them are working in the music industry in some capacity, whether that's in local bands or perhaps going further afield. And I've met up with a couple as well since leaving university, and they've talked through their plans. And yeah, they're a talented bunch for sure, and they certainly have the world at their feet, so to speak.
Yeah, and they're young as well. I mean, it's just not fair, really, is it?
No.
But you've done well over the years as a musician, and you've toured the world and played all over the place, haven't you? Tell us about some. I know Sian Evans, people like that. People who have you worked with over the years?
Oh crikey! So do you want to go from the beginning, or do you just want
go on?
Like
talk me through from the beginning.
So very quickly from the beginning, because I was like I said to you, Steve, because you interview people in their middle age, there's quite often quite a lot to talk about. So I'll whistle stop talk through it. But at the age of 6, my father bought me a piano. I remember 3 of his mates put it on a trolley, pushed it 3 miles to the house, and I started playing piano at home. He used to make me sit down and practice half hour a day. I used to play some classical music, but I was always keen on playing popular music and so on and so on. And in school, then I picked up the tuba. I played in brass bands, orchestras, wind bands, and so on. And then by the age of 14, my father bought me my first bass. And I played in a punk band. So we played in this punk band in the garage. We did a couple of gigs. It's real stereotypical, but it's true. And looking back, I actually thought we were all right. Although I'm sure the neighbors wouldn't agree with that. So I kind of failed at school. School didn't really work out for me. So I went back to college to get some GCSEs. I went to St David's College. And there I did my first gig at the Bristol Hotel on Penarth Road with a soul band sold out.
Okay.
And basically from there I started working in the docks. I worked at the Havana Bakery. I was a forklift truck driver, and I was doing covers and stuff like that. Wow. So I was playing in covers bands plus work. And then one day my father, I was really lucky to have a supportive parents. My father sat down to me and he said, the 2 most important things in life are music and the arts. Everything else you do just fills in the time. So he said, why don't you go back to college and study music? So I went off to Neath College. At the time, they were doing a popular music course. And I went there, met some absolutely amazing tutors. The tutors down there, Richard Locks, Martin Webbers, Alan Good, Alan Lockyer, Kevin Dunn, who's Bonnie and Tyler's bass player. Wow. And during this time of going to college, I subsidized it by playing solo piano around Cardiff. So for 3 or 4 nights a week, I was playing in the Royal Hotel, the Marriott Hotel, Pierre Victoire. I was just gigging, just playing solo piano, making myself some money. Alongside that, I'm still playing punk music and still playing all of that. And I finally get a call to play a cafe jazz, which is now up opposite the castle. At the time the 4 bars in. And there's a guy there called Andy Moll, and I was playing bass that evening, and I was dreading it because I knew that I wasn't very good because I only played in punk bands and so on. And at the end of it, he couldn't stop laughing, Andy Moore. Andy Moore is a local guitarist who played with all sorts of bands, and he was really well respected. He was brilliant at what he did. And he was laughing. He came up to me at the end and he said, so that was dreadful. And I just looked at him and I felt dejected beyond belief, And he said, but he looked me straight in the eye and he said, but I'll see you next week. And what he did then, he kind of, every time I went back to play with him, he was giving me pointers, he was giving me hints and tips. He was saying, try this, try that, think about this, think about that. And because I played piano and I was also playing jazz piano and so on, I was starting to get into that a little bit more. So he was a real pillar for me when I was younger, for sure. He kind of looked after me for a period of time and really helped me in that process. So then from there, I started playing in the house band at Cafe Jazz for many years. And I played in many local bands like Dr. Maybe, played in bands like the Hipsters, Rain Dance. I played in Wasse. And I played with Rob Taylor at the Inn on the River. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember Rob Taylor, yeah.
Down by the Taff. And then from all of that, I started playing at the Toucan Club, where I met Simon Kingman.
Oh, okay.
Who's a lifelong friend of
mine. Just across the river.
Yeah, so I started playing there. And, you know, we've worked together for the last 25 years. He's definitely a lifelong friend. We've talked together, we've toured together, and we've gigged together and so on. So I played there for quite a few times throughout the week. It was fantastic because Cardiff didn't have anything like that.
Look at that handsome boy behind me. Look at that handsome boy behind me. Look at that.
That's Peter Gabriel's studio, that is, in Bath. That's
is it?
That was a recording we did with Sian, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on with your story, John. I just put a picture in the background.
Not at all. And then I went to the St. David's Hotel down the bay, where we were playing five times a week at some point, still doing Cafe Jazz. So at this point, I'm doing lots of playing, residencies and playing jazz and so on.
Yeah.
And then I ended up playing Hammond organ and Fender Rhodes for Ether, the Welsh band Ether.
Did you?
And we went on tour.
Wow.
I was on the Alicia's Attic tour with them.
Wow. Can I just say, John, I don't know whether I think you like this. I don't mean to be rude, but I think you like it. Rory, I interviewed Rory about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we went back through his career, and it was just a brilliant conversation. So it's on the Keep Cardiff Live site. Have a look. I think you really like it. I didn't know he did that.
He's superb, Rory.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I bumped into him not so long ago, and he's still fantastic at what he does. He's
and a lovely guy too.
He is, absolutely. He's definitely a talent. So I was coming back from, we finished doing those gigs, and then I was I started recording albums for local artists and for jazz and funk and that. And then by the age of 19, I guess my life took a little bit of a twist. I don't know if you want me to
yeah, that. Please.
You can edit this in properly though, Steve, right? Now I've stopped my flow. If I'm talking too much, you must say.
No, please carry on. It's great. I'm learning loads about you.
So for me, from the age of 19, I don't know. You know, I've always had faith. You know, I've always had this inherent faith within me. And at the age of 19, I think my life kind of changed slightly. And this is a photograph which comes out of this story actually.
Great.
Photograph that you there.
Okay.
I used to go surfing loads, and at the age of 19, I was down Southern Down, and we were waiting for sets. You know what sets are when you're surfing, waiting for waves to come in, and you can catch certain ones and all this. And I just kind of questioned myself. I found myself questioning how this works, and then from that point on, I became real inquisitive about how all of this works, how nature works, and how everything else kind of works. And I kind of went on this journey to find out a little bit more about that. And I ended up going to a church in Cardiff called City Temple. And it led me to explore this idea of an overall creator. And I really believe that kind of God was speaking to me through nature. So I started reading the teachings of Jesus, and basically it transformed my life, and it kind of set me on this path which you couldn't really make up. So I started going to church and engaging in that, and really following the teachings of Jesus. And I became a Christian, which I'm still involved with heavily today, obviously. Yeah. And I think sometimes people talk to you about being called when it comes to going to church. But, you know, for me, that doesn't mean that you have to be a pastor or a Billy Graham or anything like that. It means becoming all that God's called you to be, and someone who puts him first in everything that you do. So at that point in my life, that's what I started to do. So I had this real moment and encounter with God, and I started going down this path. So I'm still playing, I'm still touring, and I'm still gigging and doing all of those things.
You still a punk? Were you still a punk?
I wasn't still a punk, but I do bear this. I do bear some of the scars of it still, which is absolutely fun. Yeah. I got married quite quickly to Claire after 6 weeks.
Wow.
We got engaged, and then we got married. We're still married. We have 2 amazing boys, and we kind of always looked at life as a little bit of an adventure. And that's when I started venturing into education. I was still gigging full time. But then I got myself an education degree to help subsidize some of that as well, because when you have a family and children, it's not always the prime job to have if you're trying to have something consistent. So in my mid-20s, Steve, shall I carry on or shall I?
Can you tell me how the picture behind me now? How does that tie into what you're talking about?
It does. So in my mid-20s, I started playing with Mike Doyle, who's a local artist around here. We started doing theatre tours. So I've been in his band for the last 18 years, and we still gig and tour, and we released a couple of singles that have sold 250,000 or something like that. So
wow.
So I'm still playing that. But I started playing in church, and I started using my skills in church. So I was playing in church on a Sunday, but I was also recording albums, playing at various conferences and so on. And we used to play in churches up the valleys, and we used to play the CIA in Cardiff, for instance, with different artists and different worship bands and so on. And then that picture behind was taken just before I went on my first tour to the States, where we did a 3-week tour in America with some worship artists over there, with some guys from Indiana and from Canada as well. And I went over there playing bass and some second keys as well. So that picture was the promo picture from
right.
that tour.
You look like you're really in the zone there. You know, you're one of these bass players. What do you do with that fifth string, man? What's our fifth string all about? You know.
Yeah, we can talk about that. It's actually a debate with the guys that I'm teaching at the moment. In terms of equipment and that, I tend to play a 4-string, and I go out with a Moog synth bass to play the bottom end, because for me it's far more controllable that way than to play. You know, you have to spend a lot of money on a 5-string bass to get that fifth string not sounding flappy, and to make it sound great. And my friend and business partner next door is a mix engineer, and he always says the same thing about the fifth string. So 4 strings. If you can't do it on a 4, you can't do it. I always laugh and say to my students and stuff.
Just going to ask you about that, John, as well. With I mean, like the left hand kind of thing, you know, with keyboards and whatever. I've just been reading the Brian Wilson book, which is, I don't know if you've read it. That book, I Am Brian Wilson. You can't see on the screen because you can see it there possibly. I Am Brian Wilson, and he's talking about that, you know, with the Beach Boys, about how the kind of talking about the Moog, actually talking about how that kind of really low kind of sub bass territory, you know, which filters into the music. Does that affect is that in your mind at all when you're bass playing, the sort of left hand action on the keyboard and the bass, because you do both things?
Yeah, so what I do is when we go on tour at the moment, which we'll come on to about playing with Sian and Kosheen, but when we go on tour, there's some tracks which are quite poppy, so I play bass for that, and then for the drum and bass stuff, the electronic stuff, I tend to just play the Moog.
Okay.
I run the Moog and the bass through the same effects processes and so on, so you get this absolutely ginormous sound, and it's fantastic. You know, the Moog is a brilliant piece of kit to take everywhere with you. So, I mean, if you're a bass player out there, I would definitely advise you learn to play bass synth as well. It's absolutely, you know, as different artists that I've played with and toured with, they always say, do you play synth as well? So that's something that I've been fortunate enough to be able to do, because I've spent years playing piano as well at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, because I was interested. One of the questions I was going to ask you, you've already answered it, but I was kind of interested because I've only really known you as a bass player. I knew you played keyboards as well, but but the piano came first, so it was that left hand stuff that was going on before it, you know, became part of what you do with the bass.
The reason that's important for me is because by relating it to the piano, you're relating everything to harmony. You're understanding how harmony works. You're understanding how melody fits, and when you know that, you understand what your role as a bass player more, because you're able to play. It's always about playing for the song, rather than necessarily just playing chops. And I think you've done a great job as a bass player. If people will notice when you're not playing, it's that kind of vibe.
Yeah, that's true. When you are. I'll bring you on to the lady who's behind my left shoulder in a second. Yeah. You might recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing with the bass player, I was listening to something the other day, and I can't remember what it was now, but it was to do with bass and the bass guitar. You know, and don't misinterpret me now, because you know, I don't mean it. I've got so much respect for bass players as musicians. I really do, yeah. But they are kind of quite often the forgotten one, you know, in the bands, even more so than drummers, really, bass players. I was listening to this thing the other day, and there's this fantastic bass line going on, right? Really quite funky stuff, like Wrecking Crew kind of sound, you know, that was going on. And then the drums come in, and all of a sudden it's in the mix, but you know it's kind of there. It's still doing that thing, but it's not kind of front of house, you know? Yeah, I don't know how you feel about that as a bass player.
That's fine. That's why you play bass, I think, because you don't really want to be center of attention or anything like that. And I also, for me, I just love it because you can add something of value, which, like I said, without it, you'd notice that it was missing.
Definitely.
It's one of those instruments that blend into the overall mix, but it's not, no one's really looking at you whatsoever, which is absolutely fine. But from a musical point of view, I find it quite interesting because you're able to create something really solid and unique for yourself.
Yeah.
That you're underpinning everything else that's going on. But in terms of the drummer, I mean, you're only as good as your drummer ultimately. If you've got a weak drummer, then the band will sound pretty weak, to be perfectly honest. So
yeah.
So I think drummers are probably more important. Can you believe that? Can you believe that I'm actually saying
I'm
that?
not. I can't believe you're saying that.
In terms of when people notice you, is what I mean.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, it's very much, you know, because it, like with Sean, with Kosheen, it's you know, literally drum and bass. You know, it's that kind of amalgam between the drum and bass. That's kind of where it's at, isn't it? Rhythmically, pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the band playing with Sean. We've got Mitch Glover on kit. Mitch with the original drummer from Kosheen as well. He's played with all sorts of other signed artists now, and he's fantastic. He just plays everything that's required for the song in a very straightforward way, and it just works and it just fits. You know, he's definitely a machine. Yeah.
If only all drummers were like that.
If only all drummers were like that. Just play what's required and lock it down.
Yeah, and stop doing those flipping solos when we're not playing. You know, what's all that about? You know. Tell me about Sian Evans working with Sean and Kosheen, because I suppose you said when you started in your story, you'd gone to the States, you'd started to play on sort of within the kind of Christian kind of scene, I suppose, but you know, quite a big level. I'm guessing that led you into working professionally within bands. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, so basically, I was obviously still playing lots of different gigs and so on. But when I came back from the States, I hooked up with a singer from Pontypridd called Kath Woolridge. She's super talented, and we kind of set out something to resource the local church, so to speak. So we started this band, and we started doing some training and so on in the local area. And from that, we did lots of gigs, we did lots of recordings, we played lots of events, we worked for we did lots of recordings for the BBC and so on. Then we recorded 2 albums, we signed a record deal, we recorded 2 albums, and we signed a publishing deal for the songs, which are still out there today. And she continues to head that up, and it's absolutely fantastic. So definitely give that a check out. Wales. And then from that, for me, I was working at the university. I was doing my master's in worship music. I was traveling across to the States and so on and so on. And so life was kind of getting consumed a little bit with.
I suppose I should say we both did that qualification at the same time, didn't we?
That's what these grey hairs are here from, Steve. That's for certain. But it was a great experience working with Paul Carr on that for sure. And then when I came back, whilst I was doing that and I was still playing occasionally, I had a phone call from my long friend Simon Kingman to say, "Hey, Sian Evans is playing in a pub in the Vale. Do you fancy coming along and playing some bass?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So it was a covers kind of gig, and we did some really cool songs, some really cool numbers. And then after that, I had a phone call from him to say, "Hey, listen, I understand you play piano as well. We're doing an acoustic band where we play the Kosheen songs acoustically. So can you come up to London and play with the rest of the guys?"
Yeah.
There it is. So I went up to London. I played with her acoustic band, and they asked me to play at Bristol with them. And then literally from there, the whole thing just started, because the next gig after Bristol was St. Petersburg, where we flew out to Russia and started playing and so on. And then as we started progressing through, the gigs became electronic gigs. So for those, then I jumped on the bass and I was playing synth bass.
Wow.
And I've been playing, I think it's 6 years that I've been playing alongside Sian and that. And, you know, they're all fantastic friends. Ron on guitar, Ron McElroy, like I said about Mitch Glover. And obviously Sian is an amazing front person. She's a fantastic singer. She's a real ball of energy. And you know, you can't help but get swept along with the energy that she creates on stage.
Yes.
It's absolutely fantastic.
She's got a big personality, that's for sure.
Pardon?
She's got a big personality, that's for sure.
Yeah, she's fantastic. And basically, we played at stadiums, arenas, and venues all across Europe. You know, UK, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Belgium, Germany, France, Switzerland, Holland, Austria, Romania, Hungary, Croatia, Slovakia, Poland, Czech Republic. We've just been all over. And I think before this lockdown, I think last year I'd done over 50 flights. You know, and lots of that was playing with Sian. So yeah, it's fantastic. I do love it. It's a great, you know, there's some really cool gigs, and she is absolutely fantastic at what she does for sure.
So Kosheen had, I think, one particularly big hit in the UK charts. Was it Louder? Is that right? maybe.
So Louder was Sian Evans with DJ Fresh.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a number one.
That was big, wasn't it?
It was big, but they've had also. I mean, Hydra. It's interesting when you go to lots of these places. Everyone's singing along.
Yeah.
And, and it's great because some of those songs could be 20 years old, but they've stood the test of time because people still come up with their album sleeves and ask it to sign them, and people are still singing the songs and so on. So, yeah, it's fantastic. The band sounds fab. We've got our own sound guy as well. He does an amazing job, and yeah, everywhere we go, it's really well received.
So how big are Kosheen then? You're saying like Eastern Europe in particular, I suppose, but like massive stadiums we're talking here, yeah?
We played the Sochi Olympic Stadium a few years back. We've played ice hockey arenas. We've played obviously lots of festivals. But then we've also played clubs. And I think what's absolutely fantastic for me is whether you're playing a club or whether you're playing in a large arena, it's exactly the same. What the band bring is exactly the same. There's no difference. If we were playing for you now, it'd be exactly the same as if you were playing on one of those big venues.
Talking about Simon there behind, just want to show one more person. This put this person up as well. So behind me there, Dion. Do you reckon that young lady?
Yeah. So I met Dion over 20 years ago at the Toucan Club. Unfortunately, we're still lucky to play with Simon and Dion in the Pepper Seeds.
Yes.
Which was still around Cardiff gigging and so on. And that's she's fantastic as well for sure.
She's got an awesome voice, hasn't she?
She's got a fantastic voice, and yeah, she's just got it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Sure. And when Dion walks into a room, you notice,
Oh, absolutely. She's taller than everyone else to start with. But she's got an amazing voice, yeah, and she's real good fun to work with as well.
I bet she is, yeah. So the Pepper Seeds, I mean, you played quite small venues with them, but and that's a different kind of buzz altogether, I suppose. Is it?
Yeah, that's that. One of the reasons you go into music is to play music with your mates and have a great time, right? And that's basically what that band is. We're all friends in that band. Totally, really respect all the other musicians in that band, and we just get together, have a great laugh, play some great grooves, and I just come home from it just really thoroughly enjoying myself. So it comes back to what we were saying earlier. Whether you're in a big venue or a small venue, it makes no difference. If you love what you do, you love what you do.
Do you remember a time when you did just, I don't know, a really big gig, and you thought, blimey, I've kind of made it. Here I am. This is it. There must have been. Was it one gig you thought, I can't believe I'm doing this? Has that ever happened to you?
I don't know. I don't know if it's a case of I don't know what made it means, to be honest. I think that.
Well, I mean, you're in the big league, aren't you? You're playing in those big stadiums and big crowds.
Yeah, but on the flip side, it's also still coming back to that. I'm not trying to be humble about it. It's true that you still, if you're playing with your mates and you're enjoying it, then that's what it's about. And whether people are watching, lots of people are watching or not. I mean, I've had highlights. Obviously, playing with Sian is a massive highlight because we do some amazing gigs. I've been out to Dubai to play gigs. I went on tour with Zervas and Pepper.
Yeah. And tell me about that a bit.
They were amazing. I was blown away by that, actually.
Because Simon's involved there again, isn't he?
Yeah, I played bass and did some backing vocals for them as well, and they were like football stadiums in Germany. And,
lovely.
Yeah, that was quite an eye opener. Thinking, especially when they point to you and say, "Can you sound check your vocals?" And I'm kind of thinking, yeah, that's. I wonder how this is going to sound compared to everyone else in the band, But that was cool. And then I also played with my mate Sam Blake from London quite a bit. From Elam Sound, we do some writing, recording, and playing together as well. So, so when you say made it, I'm not so sure that's a.
I didn't mean that in a kind of a Ponzi way. I just mean,
I get it.
I've never played a big gig, I've played the Globe once,
Great venue.
It was quite big, but I to go on a major stage and all the background stuff going on, and the tent situation and the riders and all this stuff, never been there, never done it,
Yeah, I think the first time we did it, I did it. I'm trying to think where we were. It might have been Russia, and there was probably about 35,000 or 40,000 people there or something. And
wow.
I definitely walked on the stage and thought, oh man, I wish I'd practiced these songs more. I wish. But it was a great experience. I'm not going to deny, and I think life's about experiences and about fulfilling, like being on an adventure and fulfilling all those things. And so I'm super grateful that I've had the opportunity to do that, and I don't take it for granted whatsoever. and it's
Well, I
something
mean,
which I'm really
knowing
chuffed with.
you as I do, enough to make comments like this. I mean, what I really like about you, John, amongst the things I like about you, you've just got a total love of life, and that really comes across. It really does,
Oh, that's true.
You just love your life, which is how
I do.
great is that? Well, you seem to.
I love what I do. I love
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
I love seeing other people achieve, and it sounds a bit corny, but I do. I think that's one of the reasons
yeah.
why I got
Well, that's
into
why teaching
education.
works, isn't it?
Absolutely. And
Mm,
yeah, no, I love hanging out with people. I just love trying firsts. Does
mm.
that make sense? If someone says we're going to do something and it's a first for me, I'm like, oh yeah, let's try it. Let's do it.
So this love of life, right, and this kind of wish to try new things, to meet new people, has led you into quite a different career path. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I've looked at the stuff. You sent me some links to stuff. It looks absolutely amazing. Tell me all about it. And is this kind of your thing? You driving this?
Yeah. So basically, I think I said to you that since I was quite young, that my my music and my faith have always been intertwined, so to speak, in
Hmm.
as is my life. And so I've always, like I say, I've always been going to church and I've always been playing there and so on. And in 2016, a friend of mine got a job with a church in Kampala.
Hmm.
And he said, "Hey, listen, I've got this job with Watoto Church in Uganda." And I was on the phone saying, "Yeah, that's great." I knew he was going for a job. And he said, why don't you connect with these guys?" And I was kind of like going, wow, you play worship music, so why don't you connect with these guys? I said, okay. So I did. I had a couple of Skype meetings with a chap called James Skinner, who's part of the leadership of Watoto Church
Hmm.
in Kampala, and we talked on Skype a couple of times, and we hit it off, and we're great friends. We chat all the time, and when I go out there, that we stay with him. So he said, "Why don't you come over and see what we do?" So I spoke to my wife and Claire, and she's always been like this as well. She goes, "Yeah, just get on a plane and go." So I got on a plane. I flew to Entebbe. Never been to that part of Africa in my life. Got off. He picked me up, and I hung out with him for a week just to see what Watoto does. And I think it's safe to say that I was blown away. And because you've taken that first step, because it was a first, and I said,
Hmm.
"Well, let's just go and do it." My life took another change of direction, so to speak.
What's
I
special
think
about Watoto Church?
it's the sheer scale of how they impact their local community, their nation, and their nations. And I think that's all down to the obedience of their founding pastor from Canada, who moved to war-torn Kampala in the 80s and set up this English-speaking church
Hmm.
in downtown Kampala. So let me give you a rough overview of Watoto Church. So
Yeah.
they send out 100 choirs. They've sent out over 100 choirs in the last number of years, which have literally played at churches. They played for the Queen. They've been to the White House and so on. And has a
Wow.
congregation of 34,000 people. They have 13 campuses, and within that, they have 3 children's villages. So there's lots of orphans at the time in Uganda. They were orphaned due to the AIDS epidemic and through war and so on. And this church really took it upon themselves to start looking after them and placing them in the family on the village with brothers and sisters and the mother and so on. And they give them education and they love them and they train them and all of these kind of things. But Watoto also has 180-acre farm which feeds the villages. They look after 4,000 neighborhood mums where they
Wow.
literally teach them in educational programs, and they
Yeah.
have trauma rehabilitation, business skills, and income generation activities. And they also do a Keep a Girl in School project where they give, I think it's like 12,000 girls sanitary products to make sure they stay in school to get an education. So I was just blown away by like, wow, this church is really impacting their local community and their nation. And they'd started this thing over there called Worship Academy, where basically the kids on the village would
Hmm.
sing in church and so on. So after a week of hanging out with James, he said, "What can you do to help?" And I was like, I haven't got a clue, because I was so overwhelmed by what I'd seen and by what happens when people mobilize themselves to make social change and make a difference.
Hmm.
So I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll teach the bass player from the UK online." So I was still working at the university, and then one hour a week, I would go to my shed. I painted the walls of my shed white. I bought some of these lights, which I'm using here from eBay, just to make it look like don't worry, I'm not in my shed now, but like a white background. And I taught him for a whole year. And after a year, I gave him the curriculum, and I gave him all my teaching notes, and he started teaching 11 other bass students at the church. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So by teaching him, you're kind of empowering him then to be able to start teaching others and so on.
Yeah.
So about the same time, I met my really good friend and business partner, Sam Gibson, who's just down here as well. And I was talking to him about this, and he said, "Well, listen," he said, "I'll give you some studio space, move out of the shed, come down here, and we'll start going." So the Creative Lab Academy was born. So it was me teaching one bass player, and then after a year, I thought, well, how else can we develop this, and how else can we impact some of the musicians over there? So I employed a drummer, a guitarist, a keys player, and a vocalist, and we did that for a year. And then the year after that, we thought, how can we expand this a little bit further? So now we engage with 23 tutors from the UK and USA, and we teach all of the instrumental streams. We also teach improvisation, film theory, storytelling, script writing, songwriting. We teach Adobe, we teach Ableton, we teach Mainstage, we teach Logic, we teach social media strategy, and so on. So we've got these 23 tutors who teach these guys at Watoto every single week. So we got tutors from Nashville, from California, Colorado, London, Cardiff, Newport, and Nice. There we go. So it's quite a mix of tutors.
Any of the people that we've mentioned have been involved in this, like Simon or Dion? These kind of people had any involvement in this at all? Or?
Simon teaches for us. He teaches some music industry lessons to some of the guys out there, and he also he runs improvisation class for us. So he has run an improvisation class for us as well. Yeah. And then I use lots of the guys that I've toured with and played with, over the years as well, from that church scene as well as that.
So I mean, that's fantastic, John. By the way, I remember you telling me, "Oh, Steve, I'm off to do something else." You've done something quite significantly else, haven't you? And well done. I'm really pleased for you. You've got a nice looking bass behind you, which we can't really in this capacity. We won't get a good sound out of, but I'm sure you do when you do your stuff. If you were teaching me how to play bass, was that sort of ground up? Do they need to be sort of intermediate? Does it matter? Or?
Yeah. So what you mean in terms of Watoto?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that you do, the teaching that you do, is it a particular client you kind of work with, or does it?
Yeah, so basically, what I tend to do, what we've come to the agreement is that we'll teach some of their principal musicians because they record. They've got a studio. They record. They tour all over the world. They do lots of collaborations with some really famous people. They're the real deal in that respect. So I kind of teach some of their principal musicians, and then they start teaching others. So we go through two 12-week semesters, 24 weeks. And then we give them all the teaching notes, give them all the curriculum, and they start writing their own relative to the students that they're teaching. So if they're complete beginners, they've got beginners material. If they're advanced, they've got advanced material, and so on. So that's basically how we do it.
And what about I don't know, how does it pay for itself? Is it like a subscription thing, or how does that work?
No, basically Creative Lab Academy is contracted to Watoto, and we engage with all the tutors on their behalf to get them as much training as possible to make sure that they're able to build up their own educational programs and all their online content and so on. I mean, coupled with the online teaching, I go out there 4 or 5 times a year. I call it my second home. I absolutely love it out there. And we go out there 4 or 5 times a year where we teach in creative weeks. We do songwriting, we do teach the band, we do instrumental lessons and so on. So yeah, we still get to do that.
Are you a well-known figure there? Are you a legend?
There's not many middle-aged, fat, ginger, 6'2" Viking-looking blokes walking around Kampala. So I'm not.
Noticeable.
The guy at security at Kampala Airport, Entebbe Airport, he said, "You were here not so long ago, right?" I said, yeah.
When you're not into the security guys, things are probably developing. But Watoto Church, is it kind of a well-known, kind of worldwide kind of phenomenon? Is it unusual in that way?
So basically, Watoto Church is based in Uganda. It's based in Kampala. But the reason they're known across the world is because they send choirs out all over the world. And these choirs tour and they perform at churches, and they go around playing at churches and different venues and so on all around the world. So they can send out up to 6 choirs a year to different parts of the world, to different continents where they perform.
So I remember when you were doing the Masters by Research that we were talking about earlier, and I remember you showing me some of the content, and it was obviously from the States, So is there a difference in terms of, it might be, I don't know if you can even answer this, but when we were looking at the kind of content from the States, I remember we had this conversation about kind of spirituality and sort of connections with audiences and reactions and this kind of stuff, if you remember.
Yeah.
Is there any difference at all in the sort of, style or substance of kind of the African kind of spiritual community and the American at all? I don't know.
100%. Yeah, I think there's a tendency for some churches to go and find the biggest church in the world and maybe copy and mimic some of that. But what's interesting about it, like communities generally, churches have their own DNA. They have their own distinct features. And for me, Watoto is definitely different, say, to a mega church in the States or a mega church in Australia. It has its own flavor, its own style of worship. It has its own priorities in terms of how it does church and so on. So 100%. And one of the things that we do is we teach basics, and then we ask them to formalize them so they're relevant to the region of the world that they're in. Because, I don't profess to know everything about African music, that's for sure. And when they play it, I mean, I'm always like blown away. I love it. I love jamming with them over it because I'm always learning myself.
I bet, yeah.
But when it comes to basic techniques, then they tend to ride across all of those different cultural differences. Each church has its own DNA, so to speak. So rather than replicate what other churches do, one of the things that Watoto undertakes, but something that we absolutely try and feed into, is to be able to empower them to create their own sound and their own DNA based around their own community. Because obviously, it's a different church to mega churches in America and Australia.
What is the difference, though?
In terms of how the church operates?
Is it to do with kind of a sensibility? Is it to do with like an interpretation? What's the difference between what these guys are doing in Africa and what's happening in these big kind of churches in the States?
Yeah, I think different churches have different emphasis, which come from leadership. I mean, you find that with local church in Cardiff as well. And one thing that Watoto is massive on is looking after widows and orphans, for instance. You don't get that in every other church, but that's okay, because other churches might be dealing with the homeless and with bigger social justice issues and so on. So I think different churches have different emphasis. And I also think it's about churches working with their community to meet the needs of that community. Whether you have thousands of orphans due to the AIDS epidemic and due to war in the middle of America is probably unlikely, but it doesn't mean that there aren't problems which churches in the States are also pouring into and becoming the guardians of those people at the same time. So different churches have different outputs. I mean, from a Christian point of view, everyone worships the same God without a shadow of a doubt, and some of those fundamentals don't change. But I think how people do church can vary from continent to continent and from church to church, for sure.
So, I mean, as a musician, like when you're playing with Sian and Zervas and Pepper, and they're all different. They're all kind of different animals, really. Yeah. How important, if at all, is your kind of spirituality, if you like, within your kind of playing? Is it something that's always with you, or are you sometimes just in that zone as a musician? I don't know.
Yeah, so this is a big one, actually. It's funny enough, we were talking about this not so long ago about creativity. What makes you a creative person with a faith? Yes. Now, from my perspective, and I know not everyone will agree with this, but from my perspective, that all creativity is given to people to use to worship God. Now, I know that's a broad statement. Some people choose to use it to make money. Some people choose to use it to make fame or to have fame. Some people choose to use it to gain influence and power. But some people, I think the true nature of creativity as a believer is to use it to glorify God. So for me, whether I'm playing with Sian or whether I'm playing a jazz gig or for me, I still give it my best. I still give it my all, because I realize that what I have and what I've got was instilled in me to fulfill that life that I believe that I've been called to. So whether I'm playing with Sian or whether I'm playing in church, I still treat it as the same thing, even though the output is slightly different.
So that's a very personal philosophy, isn't it?
It's a personal philosophy,
of yours. Yeah. Because obviously, there are a lot of creative musicians who have no faith or no ostensible faith at all.
But it doesn't detract from that, because they're still being super creative with what they're doing. I think sometimes it's whatever you hang your purpose onto, isn't it? Sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's my personal belief. That's not a generalization.
But which you've obviously thought about a lot, though. I think You know, it's something which you do consider your kind of ethos, don't you? You can't consciously live what you do, I think.
Yeah, for me, it's life's an adventure.
Yeah.
And how people live out adventures is different quite often. And like I said, for me, it's about striving to become everything that I believe God calls you to be. And for me, that's about putting Him first in everything that I do. I know that if that maybe if I just settled for comfort, I could have a Volvo and a nice house and a career and so on. But I didn't really want to settle for that. I just want to, like you said previously, I just want to live life to the full and just to have as many firsts as I can and to achieve everything that I've set out to do. Really.
So with I've come across something called OnSong. Have you tried OnSong? You know OnSong?
No.
I mention it because it's an interesting one. It's an app. It's a music kind of app where you can basically off your phone or iPad or whatever, you can just call up the chords and you can edit and play the music.
Brilliant.
So I use it as a musician, and lots of musicians are using it. But guess where it came from? It came from the church. It's a really big thing in the States, is this OnSong app, you know, and it's kind of interesting that has you know, Christianity and spirituality and religion, I suppose, in some ways, has had that influence on people just making music, which is kind of nice, you know.
It is, and I think I mean, not to talk too much about history, but I think quite often the church was the leader in lots of these things, and in the last few hundreds of years, it hasn't been the case. It's very much copied culture rather than necessarily led culture, and I think there are some shifts in that. I mean, you take some churches around the world, and they literally create stuff just to give away. You know, it's not about making money. It's not about creating platforms and all of that. It's about giving things away for free. And I think, I mean, you know, the more people that create, the better. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So if OnSong, you say it's the chord charts, right? Isn't it?
It's
I know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah,
Setlist. It's like one of those apps that just allow you to create to play music.
Yeah, and I think that there's lots of people giving away lots of stuff for free, which I think is absolutely amazing. And I think the church is certainly part of that process. You know.
Yeah, OnSong is free. You know, you can pay for a more groovy version of it, but it does the trick for me. You know, with my limited number of chords, it's fine.
The accessibility that people have to be creative and to make and to be creative and to make things up from scratch and all that, it's just amazing. I just wish I had that when I was younger. You know. But then on the flip side of the coin, I'm grateful for the background that I did have in terms of
well, yeah, well, the one thing you had, which is you know, which you just literally can't buy, is you had a really supporting parent who wanted you to be creative and make music. You know, that is just brilliant, isn't it?
It is, and I never take that for granted. But you know, even when I teach students and so on, it's just trying to have the same attitude. That's what you want to do with your life, then you should do it, because you don't need to settle for mediocrity. You don't need to settle for second best. You need to do what you want to do, because you only live once, right? So just make the most of it and be as happy as you can doing it.
And again, maybe a bit of a tricky one, but I'm guessing that as like a Christian musician, you know, you must get a lot of negativity from people all the time about that, and sort of questioning, you know, your faith and why you believe it and why it matters. So if we kind of transcend Christianity to a certain extent, sort of slightly turn it on its head, what about as a musician and a songwriter and a communicator and a singer and maker of music, what about this thing called kind of spirituality? And, you know, how about that as a thing that matters?
Oh, I think the two are, for me, are really closely linked. I mean, I remember where was I? I can't remember what. I don't know if it was a Coldplay concert or something, and I'm standing there watching it, and it feels almost like a spiritual experience. I mean, you can laugh at Coldplay, but when you have 80 or 90,000 people singing along and waving their hands and all of those things at the same time, it's not a million miles removed from what happens in church at the same time. So there's definitely something that moves, and I think without a shadow of a doubt that creatives, whether they have a faith or not, are definitely tapping into a spiritual side of mankind, so to speak. Without a shadow of a doubt, I think it goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Just to mention, by the way, as well as a couple of other, you've probably not visited the Keep Cardiff Live site yet, but when you do, you'll find Simon Kingman and Ruben are going to be on there, and brilliant. Also awesome. Martin Joseph we've done lots of stuff with Martin.
Joseph is he's absolutely fantastic. He's one guy who I've been following his career for years, and I've been to see him loads of times, and it's always an absolute pleasure to go and watch him. Yeah, for sure.
Because I mean, his journey again, you know, he was originally seen as being, you know, performing in churches and being a kind of a Christian singer-songwriter, but I think he's kind of more rounded than that now, and I don't think he likes to be kind of pigeonholed as that. You know, I don't really want to speak for Martin. I've got a little time for Martin, but yeah. I think again, it's a kind of goodness and spirituality and willingness to share and just to do the good stuff comes through with him.
I first saw him in church actually many moons ago, and and he just brings that same passion every time I've been to see him. You know, he's one guy I think, oh, I'd love to play in his band. You know, he's a real legend in my heart.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for sure. No, he's great. He's really great.
He just recently released a song which was obviously about the kind of the COVID-19 thing, and it's called "When We Get Through This." So you should maybe check that out. But when we recently interviewed him a couple of weeks ago for Keep Cardiff Live, and we talked about having a band. And he said, well, I kind of done quite well as a solo musician, really, you know.
Well, exactly. He doesn't need anyone else, right?
Yeah, and it'd be a different thing altogether, wouldn't it? Him with a band.
He's awesome.
John, what's the future for you then? How's this thing going to grow? And you know, where do you see it all going? Is there any sort of thing you want to promote, or have we get in touch with you, etc.?
I mean, the Creative Lab Academy, we still continue to grow that. We still continue to work with Watoto. You can check both of those out at creativelabacademy.com. Watoto.com, you can check out the amazing work that church is doing in East Africa and beyond, so to speak. Still playing and gigging. And Tom, we've got dates. Obviously, most of the gigs are on hold.
Yeah,
that's safe to say. And we've got some UK dates coming up with Sian and some dates in Holland and Europe the beginning of next year as well. But yeah, I've got some interesting projects coming up. One with Simon, with some local singer-songwriters, and also one with my old friend Elliot Bennett as well, where we're doing some online teaching.
Oh, of course, Elliot, yeah.
So we're plowing into that as well at the same time. So yeah, so it's good. I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm looking forward to what you come up with as well. And if there's anything you want to, you want us to kind of work with you on and promote and, share for you, then by all means,
thank you very much.
Give us a shout. I thought one final thing I'd ask you before. Thanks very much, by the way, for your time. It's great to talk to you. And, hopefully we'll meet physically at one point. You can buy me that coffee, you or me, or whatever, maybe.
But probably more than one, Steve.
But we said, before we started recording this, when you worked at the University of South Wales, and now you're doing this, and this is great. But one of the things, I'm sure it'll be the same for me as and when I'm no longer there. It's the people, it's about the people, and I think that I suppose it's the same at any university. I just happen to know these people like Paul Carr, as spring to mind, I suppose. Top-notch academic, wonderful musician. All-round lovely guy, and I think he's also had some connections with Watoto Church over the years. Or if I'm not wrong,
he's taught some theory for Creative Lab Academy online.
Yeah, and I don't know whether there's any kind of your thoughts on a message to your former colleagues or whatever, or looking back on it, things you particularly enjoyed about being there.
Yeah, I think it's in terms of my educational academic career, I think. There was a window working at the University of South Wales, which was absolutely one of the best times of my life. I can safely say that I never woke up thinking, I've got to go to work. That never actually happened. And I've worked with some absolutely amazing people. Our one office was very, very loud and raucous, but it was just filled with laughter and joy basically throughout pretty much the whole day. I think you probably heard us down the corridor. So I absolutely miss all of those guys from university, genuinely as well. And I made some friends there, which I'm super fond of, and I look back and really miss working with them. That's for sure. But life's about firsts, and life's about adventures sometimes. So I definitely want to keep in touch with all those guys as we move forward into new seasons and so on. So yeah, just to say a massive hello to them all. Miss you guys.
That's nice, and of course it's good that we can do things like this. Where we can still connect. and still
absolutely
work with each other and collaborate, because I should say collaboration is, I know it's close to your heart and it's certainly close to mine.
Absolutely.
Anyway, John, thank you very, very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Lovely to talk to you again. Stay happy and jolly and, you know, enjoying life and doing all the stuff.
Try.
Good luck with everything. And I hope,
much, Steve,
I hope I'll send you a version, and I really hope we get to meet each other at some point, you know, when all this is through.
I definitely buy you that coffee. No worries.
Brilliant. Cheers, John. Thanks a lot, man.
Cheers. Bye-bye
Thank
now.
you.
Bye-bye.